Hey guys, I hope you're having a good coronacation, and I thought, given the time I have, it'd be a good time to do another sound stories video. So here we are in the studio, and let's get to it. So this particular story is again about my school's black box theater, but about a slightly different aspect of it than we previously talked about. If you remember the episode I did with Nick a couple of weeks, maybe a month ago, something like that, we discussed the equipment that we had purchased for this studio to turn it into a video studio. As of now, that equipment has not arrived because, as you know, schools are typically very slow to work with this kind of stuff. They have to approve all the stuff on the list. Everything at this point has since been approved, but then they have to send it off to BOCES and has to go through quite a significant process. However, I believe the process is nearing its end, so I would be willing to bet that by the time I'm back to school, this stuff will probably be ready for installation. Anyways, I'd like to talk about the live sound aspects of the Black Box Theater, some of the issues that we had, and a specific event I want to talk about. So every year there's a band event called X-Stock. It's kind of like a battle of the bands type of thing, minus the battle part. So you got a bunch of really cool bands, differing types, kind of rocky bands, some more, Billy Joel kind of stuff. So there's a decent variety of acts, and in my opinion, it is my favorite event of the year. I love mixing bands. Mixing bands is my passion. It's what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I think gives me a lot of experience. It's a good experience to have, and every year we try to improve it. So let me go year by year for my school. Freshman year, this particular event was held in the auditorium. I was not involved in the sound crew. It was just my buddy Nick, and it didn't sound great for a couple reasons, but mainly working with an analog mixer. None of the equipment was mic'd. Pretty much the only thing Nick was doing was mixing the vocalists, because that's all he could do. But sophomore year, I joined the team, and we moved it to this Black Box Theater because this is when the Black Box Theater was built. And the first thing that we found when getting into this building is that we could not use the built-in sound system. It was just not built for what we wanted it to do. They had two 15-inch three-way speakers. They're DB speakers, not DNB Audio-Technica, but DB Audio, slightly different company. They're active speakers, and they sound okay. But there's no low end at all, and they didn't include a subwoofer. The room is probably the same aspect ratio as this iPad, and the way I would have mounted the speakers would have been here and here facing this way. But no, what they did is mounted them here and here facing this way. And unfortunately, that is not a configuration that is optimized for the type of work that we do. So we brought in our own speakers, a pair of EVZLX 12P speakers, and placed them in the correct formation. And in fact, we actually used a corner, and then we corner loaded a single 18-inch active subwoofer. At the time, this was a Behringer VQ 1800D subwoofer. Not a subwoofer I would recommend purchasing. A little bit on the droney side, not very loud. It sounded okay. We tried to mic everything we could. We weren't able to really handle the drum set very well, and a lot of people couldn't hear themselves very well. It didn't sound great. We couldn't really hear from where we set the board up. We were working with a Behringer X32 compact. Unfortunately, the way that my school had at the time set up the D-Snakes, they had two S16s. They were both in a rack, and then they would go out to a snake panel, to a stage box. The problem was the stage box was mounted in a kind of crappy place, very, very far away from a usable place. So we only had like 4 inputs, and we had to run 50-foot cables to get our other inputs. So that was really complicated, and we ended up having a really difficult time. And it didn't sound very good. And I remember we had a lot of complaints from the musicians that they couldn't hear themselves. There was one particular musician who kept asking us to turn him up in the mix so that he could hear himself, which we refused. We are more concerned with the overall mix than him being able to hear himself, because if we had turned it up any louder, it would have sounded really bad. But that's not a trade-off you should have to make. So the next year, and this would be junior year, last year, we took a huge step forward. And what we did is we built a stage. And I know this sounds crazy. You didn't have a stage before? No, it was all on the ground, right? But this Black Box Theater has portable staging. I don't actually know what brand it is, but it's the type where there's basically a circular hole in the bottom, and then you put a tube in it and lock the tube, and you can use varying lengths of tube. And there's probably $50,000 worth of staging in there, and you can put it into any configuration you choose. There's probably 20 8 foot by 3 foot pieces that you can use. It's a weird configuration too. I've never seen 8 foot by 3 foot before. Usually it's 8 by 4. But there's 8 by 3, and then there was some 6 by 3 pieces. And between that, we put together a stage that was 24 feet wide and 9 feet deep. Yeah, 9 feet deep. The back 6 feet of that was 3 feet tall, and then it went down to 2 feet for that last part forward. And then there was a T that was maybe 6 feet wide and came out probably about 6 feet. And at the end of that, we put the subwoofer. This time, instead of using the terrible Behringer VQ 1800D, we used our STX 828S subwoofer, JBL Dual 18 subwoofer. Absolutely fantastic. But we ran into some problems doing this. Mainly that some of the adults that were involved in this didn't like the idea of making the setup more complicated. Their train of thought is that if we make everything more complicated, it's going to sound bad. The idea is that if you have a more simple setup, there's less things that can go wrong, and thus chances are it will sound better. The reason why I disagree with this is because, given me and Nick's experience, we are able to complicate things and make them work. And by complicate things, we mean building a large stage, miking guitar amplifiers, miking the drum kit, and other such things. And there became a certain point where we sort of said to some of the adults involved in this that they have to either let us do what we are going to do our jobs, or we simply won't be able to be involved. And we kind of ended up being able to get our way, I suppose. So mics were amped, drum set was mic'd, just the kick. We didn't have enough to mic the full kit, just the kick. So and then obviously we got our stage, but the stage was the hardest thing. We had to really push because they told us the stage was too big, and that it was a hazard because people could fall off of it. And I thought that was kind of ridiculous because the stage in the auditorium is 5 feet high and there's no railing on the front. You could fall right off of it, and they have no problem with that. But this stage being 3 feet high, they have a problem with that. And the points that are actually, suspended, right? Because the front of the stage is only 2 feet high. So it's only 2 feet off the ground. And the back of the stage did have a railing around it. We installed a railing. So we weren't worried about that. We ended up, I did some research, looked through some of OSHA's papers and whatnot, and determined that if a stage is less than, I think, maybe 5 or 6 feet high, it does not need to have railings at all. And I presented this, and kind of the compromise we ended up coming to is putting glow tape on the edges of the stage, which I thought was actually a really good idea. Helps people to see so that they know the difference between the edge of the stage and the floor. So we ended up getting this through, and we built our stage. And the end result looked fantastic. I'll put up a picture of it if I can find one. I'm sure I will. Not the greatest looking stage ever, but for something produced by 2 high school sound engineers, I'd say we did a pretty good job. And ultimately, it sounded pretty good. We also built a stage for ourselves to put the sound equipment on, so we could actually hear what was going on. One of us would typically stay up there, and another would move around with an iPad. I was probably focusing a little more on sound. Nick was handling the lights. We did lights this year, whereas the previous year, lights had been taken care of by somebody else. So we used my DMX to do the lights, and they looked fantastic. One thing I'll say they nailed in that room was the lighting. It's really expensive, Philips kind of stuff, and color source pars, really expensive, all 5-pin DMX. I don't like the lighting control board that they bought. I don't know what it is. I actually don't care. I think if you're going to spend less than $5,000, the $300 MyDMX or whatever control device you have for a computer is going to be better than any physical board up until a certain price point. And so I think that actually ended up looking really, really good. And we just asked the band, we said, what colors do you want? What color do you want here and here and here? And they said, oh, we want this and this and this. And we took that and made it look nice. And I think everybody ended up appreciating that, both the bands, us, and the audience. The result was pretty good. So this year, senior year, we decided, how are we going to advance that further? Well, we had a couple of ideas. Number one, we're taking those speakers down, those 15-inch speakers. We finally have enough clout in the school that we could just tell people that we wanted them down, and so those are coming down. So we're going to have those DB speakers down, and we can use them along with our subwoofer. We're going to put them on stands. We're going to mic the entire kit this year. We have a little bit more equipment to do that, so that's not going to be an issue. That's probably it. It sounded pretty good the previous year. I mean, I've learned a lot since working every Sunday at one church. So just in a sound perspective, it's probably going to sound better just from experience being better. But those are the main changes. Xstock was supposed to be 2 days ago. Didn't end up being 2 days ago because it got canceled for reasons that are pretty obvious. And I was really disappointed about that. But it'll probably get postponed. So we'll just have to wait a little longer. But that's the story of Xstock. If you like this video, please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And hit that notification bell. Punch that notification bell, as the other YouTubers say. And for now, keep your ears open. Have a good one, guys.